All right, welcome back. This is the Coach Mark Gottfried Show, and man, I'm excited today because I've got a guy as a guest here on my show that I have admired for years and years as a player, as an executive, and just as a friend. But one of the UCLA's all-time great players, and had a great career in the NBA. Kiki VanDeWeghe. Kiki, it's great to have you.
Mark, it's great to see you. I see you got your red, orange. You're going to call it Auburn. I'm going to call it Alabama. But let me just start this off right. Turn back time a little bit. You were a heck of a coach in your time and a great player. For I think Oral Roberts in Alabama, and
Wow.
you won. Coach of the Year, Alabama, you won a SEC title, but you won a national champion someplace. And I'm trying to remember the name of the school. What was the name of that school? Would you say it for me?
I could start with an 8 clap right here if we wanted to go UCLA with the 8 clap, but and you'd probably like that since you're a Bruin.
I would love it. You're a facto Bruin. What were you there? 8 years or something?
I was there 7 years, Kiki, and I loved every minute. I tell people all the time. I always say this, Kiki. Not only is it one of the great, obviously, college basketball, schools ever in the history with what John Wooden did and then what you guys did, but it's also one of the great institutions. I tell people that all the time. The person that UCLA produces, in my view, is as good as anywhere in the country. And so I know you can relate to that because you were a student there and Rhodes Scholar. I love that. But you were just such a great player, Kiki. And I appreciate you bringing that up because 95 was a fun year for us when we won it all.
I bet it was. We might get to this, but I was in the finals myself, and I heard somebody was in the crowd. I don't know who, but we were unfortunately we did not get over the hump. But it's interesting because I think you're right about the UCLA student athlete.
Yep.
For many years, and it might have started with the great John Wooden and J.D. Morgan, who was athletic director. Ducky Drake. Ducky Drake was a trainer.
Yes.
Just a fan. Rafer Johnson's track coach. The track stadium is named after Ducky. And, they produce an athlete because they viewed themselves as teachers. They didn't view themselves necessarily as coach or sporting people. They were teachers of young men and women, and I think that's something special. They made sure that players understood what was expected of them, were part of the team, put the team first, understood what it was to be a part of a team and to grow. And you didn't know everything at that point. When you're in college, you think you know everything. And you've never run a business, you've never done anything, but you know it all, of course. But they made sure that they taught you the right way, played basketball the right way, played sports the right way, and obviously I'm proud of the Bruins, and they're having a great year this year. But I'm proud of all the college athletes. It's not easy to be a college athlete, and a lot is expected of you very early in life. When you may not have things that you may think you know everything, but you don't. And, but a lot of spotlights on you. Now we've got a financial aspect. You've got the portal. You've got all sorts of things to complicate a young student athlete's life that may take away a little bit from the academic part. I think school is so important. Learning is important. And, the old John Wooden saying that when, you're done learning, you're done.
That's right.
Or through learning, you're through. It's, but it's really true.
Kiki, one of the things that impressed me so much at UCLA when I went there, and I started as a graduate assistant, and I had played in the South at Alabama, and it was how well UCLA celebrated all of the athletes. Now, obviously, the run that John Wooden had for those, national championship titles and all that, but every sport, I can remember meeting like you mentioned, Rayford Johnson or Florence Griffith Joyner and Jackie Joyner Kersey and Mitch Gaylord and, these Olympians and in every sport. And a lot of schools, to me, UCLA has celebrated all of them. And I always liked that. I thought it was so cool. And, like yourself, even though you were a great player and a high draft pick in the NBA, you're rubbing shoulders with athletes in other sports that are just as accomplished, who are phenomenal, who are, at the top of the food chain in their sport. So how was that like for you, even as a student, knowing that you're kind of around greatness all over the place and not just in basketball?
Well, you know what? You learn an appreciation for other sports, for other athletes, and realize that, your sport isn't the only sport that counts.
That's right.
I can remember sitting there watching after our practice, I would sit there and watch the women practice. And there was a young player by the name of Ann Myers Drysdale, sister of the great, Dave Myers, who we miss obviously today. But I just was amazed at the talent and the skill of the women athletes. And it's just amazing where that game has come from. I did the first WNBA training camp, and they had a training camp all together. And I came in and I was sort of making my way back into the NBA, and I coached young athletes all the way up to pros. Taught them footwork and how to score, which I learned from Pete Newell, the fantastic coach from Cal, general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers. But he specialized in footwork. He thought that was very important. And for young athletes, it's important to know, and I'm going to throw out a couple of these quotes from him. He said, you play basketball with the ball 10% of the time. There's 10 players, but you play with your feet 100% of the time. So he thought footwork was the key, and I believe that. Anyway, I coached in that and taught the first WNBA class, and I walked away from that and was stunned how smart they were, how they paid attention, how they made sure that they were detailed and detail-oriented. And it was just such a pleasure to see athletes that were so hungry for great coaching.
Well, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, but here's a couple things that I'm going to where you and I have crossed paths, and I'm not even sure you even knew this at times. But like we talked about, I'm 16 years old, and it was really the first time I watched you play. My dad was a small college basketball coach, and he would take my mom and my sister and I to the Final Fours every year. That was kind of our, spring vacation. And we went in '79, and I watched Bird and Magic play in Salt Lake City. And then, here we come into Market Square Arena, and UCLA is playing Louisville for the national championship. And a lot of people forget that your team, UCLA, kind of barely got into the tournament. You guys were kind of on the fence there and got in, and you made a great run. And I'm sitting there watching, and I'm a young guy, and I'm going to be I'm going to flatter you here a little bit, but even at that point, Kiki, I was so impressed because my dad always taught me fundamentals, fundamentals, footwork, 2-foot jump stops, everything that, from a little age. And I watched you there, and I was so amazed. That was my first introduction to you. I'm 16 years old, and I know you've got a lot of memories from that Final Four and that run, but that had to be special for you to get to that point. And I know you came up short, but still, what a great accomplishment to play in a championship game in the NCAA tournament.
One of the best experiences in basketball, really. And, I played a lot of years in the pros, but that was something different. It was something special. You were right. We were the last team picked at the time, I think it was 48 teams qualified. So we were the last team in, and nothing was expected of us. We went and packed for one game at a time, and, it just kept going. And, we finally got into the finals, had a great run. Larry Brown, who was a super coach, was our coach. And, I had 4 freshmen, and we had a very young team. And, I was one of the few seniors on the team. And, we played Louisville, as you said. Denny Crum was the coach, an ex-UCLA assistant coach, longtime John Wooden assistant coach, but a spectacular coach. Really, really, really just so smart, and his game management skills were, second to none. And they had Daryl Griffith, who, for the sports fan out there, was, if they remember his nickname, Dr. Duncanstein. He really was athletic. They had a great team.
Yes, they did.
And it was a special run. It was that game was, at the time, I think the biggest game that I ever played in, and certainly crowd-wise, and on a national stage. And we did come up short, but what a great experience. I remember it today. I remember like different plays, and as you win a lot of games, you lose games too, and you remember the ones you lose. I have a tough time, remembering, all the games, but I remember the mistakes I made, and I remember the ones we lost.
And they hurt. They hurt. And
you never get over it, right, Coach?
No, you never get over it. And then when I went to UCLA, so I got hired in 1988, and I can remember, and Jim Herrick at the time, in his office, you could look out the glass there onto Bruin Walk, in between the Morgan Center and the John Wooden Center there. And I would watch you, and I want to say, if I have this correct, you and your father, and you guys would head in there, and you guys worked, and there was a few times I went into the Wooden Center, I sat far away, and I watched. And I just watched how you worked, and I watched with your dad, rebounding you, and I hope I have that right. But it was such a learning experience for me to just watch somebody who was as good a player as you were, but you still, worked on your game. Like you were working on the simplest things. A lot of people think as you get to the NBA, there's this whole new, level of fundamentals, and they're really the same fundamentals. You just keep perfecting them. You just keep perfecting what you were doing. But you had many, many, many days where, you just kept working on your game. That would made such an impression on me as a young coach.
It's interesting, and it stems from, my days at UCLA, and I had a high school coach by the name of Jerry Marvin, who was a Wooden disciple. And for so many years, we started our practices with the same footwork fundamentals. And, and it didn't matter who you were, how, you could have been college player of the year. You spent the first 20 minutes of practice working on fundamentals. And every year, and I know Coach Wooden started this, Ducky Drake kept it going, and you learn to tie your shoes. And it's a famous story, but it is absolutely true. And the idea was, you learned how to put on your socks so there weren't any wrinkles in there. You didn't get blisters. You learned how to lace up your shoes from the bottom up so they were tight, and, you didn't have any problems. And, it all starts with that. And no matter, it's a great equalizer. And I believe sports is a great equalizer. Game starts 0-0. And so whatever accolades you have, wherever you come from, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. You got to do it right then. And tying your shoes, starting with the fundamentals, says that every single day. We all tie our shoes the same way. I don't care what you look like, where you're from, how great, you were someplace else. We start together, and here's what we do. And so, I kind of grew up with that. And I thought that was very important, because, and I'll say another thing, what I learned over time in the NBA, and I learned it early, luckily, on a few international trips, is basketball is an international language. It's played all over the world. And it doesn't matter what playground you go to. If you can play, they'll take you. And if you can't play, you got no chance. And so you don't have to speak the language. You don't have to know anything about the culture. You don't have to know anything. All you know is I know how to play basketball. Okay, here we go. And that's a great thing about sports. It's sort of this language that you have. It's like mathematics or music. It translates across all cultures and cuts across all demographics and everything else. So it's really something that when I love when young people participate in sports because it teaches so much, and I think that's something important. And you never forget kind of your roots. And
Yeah.
I want young players to know it's very important that young players and young coaches, I know you know this, but the greatest scorers in the NBA, the greatest, from going way back to Jerry West or Elgin Baylor or any of the great scorers you might think of to today, and it's still true today, they all have great fundamentals, great footwork. People say that the mid-range game is gone, but it's not. The great scorers, the truly great ones, have a great mid-range game. Look at Steph Curry. He's known for three-pointers, great mid-range game. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, all these guys, they all have a great mid-range game. So I would encourage everybody, work on your fundamentals, and you're right, you get better and better and better as you work on them.
Kiki, a lot of people, especially younger generation, they don't really pay attention to us old guys, the older crop. But, you go back and, for Denver, I think it was your second year, you're averaging about 21. Your third year, I think it's like 26. And then maybe your third or fourth year, you're like at 29 a game in the NBA. But before all that, before the NBA and before college, and, I knew growing up, there was, like, for you, like, understanding how important the fundamentals were. So if I go back, Kiki, and I say, okay, who are some of the guys that I remember that had some of the best footwork? Obviously you're in that group. I look at a guy like Kevin McHale. Footwork was just, it was beautiful. Like, it's beautiful to watch that somebody that could maneuver with their feet, always on balance. But where did that kind of come from for you? Like, how did Kiki VanDeWeghe fall in love with the fundamentals like you did? Because in my view, I could be wrong, I think I'm right, it kind of carried you through your whole career. It made you a great player.
Well, I didn't, thank you for that. But I would say all of the great players, and I don't necessarily count myself in there, but all of the great players throughout history, and I think this goes for every sport, have great fundamentals. They all do. I don't care if you're playing tennis, if you're ice skating, it doesn't matter what you're playing. If you're a great player, you have great fundamentals. Now, you may have great talent that may separate you a little bit from everybody else, but your fundamentals carry you through. Your habits carry you through, because what happens when you get down to crunch time? What do you fall back on? You fall back on your habits. You fall back on your fundamentals. And if you don't have good fundamentals and good habits, you have to think. You have to think too much. And basketball, it's a read and react game. And so you need fundamentals. So you don't have to think about that. You don't worry about that. You don't worry about coming to a jump stop. You don't worry about how to do a reverse pivot. All that's ingrained in you, and you naturally can read a defense and react to it. But, I didn't start playing basketball again until I was 13. I was a swimmer before that. And I was not the fastest player in the world, and certainly not the biggest. I grew a couple inches when I was in college. As a matter of fact, my dad told me when I was in high school, I thought I was pretty good. And he said, well, you're going to be lucky to play in junior college. And maybe you'll play in college if you grow a little bit. But I think he was saying that just because he knew me, and he knew that would get me a little jazzed up to go. But I think that, truly it serves a very practical purpose, fundamentals. Your athleticism can come and go at different times. You can be injured, you can get tired, you fatigued, you age, all these things. Your fundamentals don't leave you. And, I equate having great fundamentals to, and I tell this story to young players all the time. I said, look, if you have, let's say you have a fantastic car. Well, I don't care what car you love, from a Ford Mustang to a Ferrari, makes no difference. And I'm not promoting the movie Ford versus Ferrari or anything, but any fast car with a great engine and unbelievable, and you have one tire with a big bump in it, how fast can you go?
Not very. Yep.
Not very fast. And you're certainly not going to win any races, and you're not going to perform very well, and your gas mileage is going to be lousy. What fundamentals do is make the tires round, and they make it roll. And so you keep practicing your fundamentals until those tires are perfectly round. And then you can utilize that great engine, the aerodynamics, the speed, the steering, the suspension, all that you can use. But you need proper fundamentals underlying all that to make it work.
Yep. Kiki, was it always UCLA for you? I know, you were in LA, and it was kind of the post John Wooden kind of couple years there. Like for you coming up in high school, was it like, I'm going to UCLA, or were there other places you were really serious about?
Yeah, I was serious about everything. Nobody was serious about me. Matter of fact, UCLA never recruited me. And it's a funny story. I'll tell you the story. So I was probably going to go to either Stanford or University of Utah, because they were one of the couple schools that actually recruited me. I wasn't a highly recruited player at all. And I only went on a couple recruiting trips. One of them was my good friend Gig Sims, who was a Redondo Beach product and played at UCLA, very talented young player. He got an invite to UNLV. And he said, well, if Kiki will come with me, I'll come visit you. So little did I know, I was a guest of Jerry Tarkanian, and started a friendship with him, who was obviously a great coach, and we had a lot of fun. But that was one of the few recruiting trips I ever took. And when I was playing, I used to play down in Pauley Pavilion and the old men's gym. And one day I was playing against Marcus Johnson, who was two-time college player of the year, and just a fantastic, one of my heroes, because he was just so talented and could do things I wanted to do and could never do. But I happened to have a good day, and my shot was going in, and those days where just, kind of everything's working. And, I sort of, he didn't play that well, and I played good defense and stole the ball once in a while, but all my shots went in. And he comes to me after the game and he says, hey, he didn't really know me. He says, kind of, who are you? Because it started with that. And the second thing was, where are you going to go to school? And I said, well, I don't know, maybe Stanford, University of Utah. And he said, well, what about here? And I said, well, they didn't recruit me and they don't want me. And he says, well, you know what? Give me your number. And he didn't say anything else. And so I didn't live too far from campus, and I get home and the phone rings. And this was at the time, no cell phones, right?
Right.
So we had a kitchen phone with a, you remember those long cords? People who don't remember those. You had a long cord that went like 3 rooms. Anyway, my sister answers the phone and says, hey, Kiki, there's a call for you. Now, I never got calls. I was very shy at that point in my life. I never got any calls. I said, okay, who is it? He says, I don't know. He's got a funny accent. And, so I pick up the phone. He says, hi, Kiki, this is Gene Bartow, coach of the UCLA Bruins. I said, yes, I know who you are, coach. And he says, I've never seen you play. This is a true story. I've never seen you play. And my assistant coaches tell me you're not good enough to play at UCLA. But Marcus Johnson just was in my office, and he said, you should be coming here. And if he likes you and wants you on the team, I'd like to come talk to you. Do you want me to come over to the house and talk to you? I met your dad before. And I said, well, what are you talking about, Coach? And he said, well, you're talking about a walk-on. What are you talking about? He says, no, we're talking about, we have one scholarship place left. We had a guy by the name of Richard Washington, who was a great player, went to the pros and went hardship at that point and was unusual. He said, we have his spot. So you have 15, you'd be the 15th guy. And I said, well, you know what? I really don't need you to come here, but I know where your office is. And he says, if you're offering a scholarship, I'll be down in 10 minutes. And it took me 10 minutes to get down there. I went down there. And so I signed, and I think he was a little surprised and a little taken back. He was hoping for some pushback, I think. I said no. And, now the funny part of this whole thing was I hadn't told my mother and my father. So at this point, and so I get home and I was excited. I didn't even think about it. I just said, you know what, I'm going. That's it. UCLA was like it for college basketball at that point. And anyway, I get home and I'm driving home, and I'm pretty happy and with things. And I said, uh-oh, I got to tell my parents. My mother wanted me to go actually either to Stanford or the Air Force Academy. And she said, you know what that costs? And anyway, so I came home and I had to tell him. My mother was a little upset at me. My dad said, you sure you want to go there? There are a lot of good players there. And I said, yeah, I want to go. Well, I found out. So I found out why they didn't recruit me, and I didn't get in the first two practices.
So you go and you got two practices you didn't get into.
Two practices. Didn't get into. Third practice. Again, I found out why I didn't get in the first two. I played against Marcus Johnson, and you remember the previous story, roles were reversed. He had like 2 or 3 dunks on me in about a minute and a half, and I got yanked out of the practice over on the side, put on the JV team. I was upset. I thought I was good enough to play, and so I had I think 54 and 60 points in 2 games on the JV, and they brought me back.
Oh, wow.
So, but it was one of the greatest things ever happened. You get a little, a little obstacle, you get a little tough time, and you find out, you know what? Okay, I'll accept this, or oh no, wake up call. So that was a great wake up call for me, and I ended up playing a lot my freshman year, luckily, and had a great time. But you learn a lot of those experiences coming out, and I always tell young players, be grateful for the tough times. Those obstacles, those tough times. That's you come out on the other side of that. Right on the other side is feeling pretty good about yourself. Fight through those. Be grateful for them. Don't complain about them. Just say, yeah, bring it on. No problem.
Kiki, talk about too, because a lot of times the public, we see this happen every now and then, but you're a high draft pick, and I think if I got this right, Dallas was a brand new franchise, and they drafted you, or they were thinking about drafting you, but you ended up kind of pushing back on that and ended up in Denver. How did that happen?
Oh, that was a really interesting story. So, my dad played basketball as well, and he played for the New York Knicks, and he went to medical school at the same time. The only person ever to do that. Certainly, and sometimes I wonder, well, what have I done lately? But I used to take the subway down, run into Madison Square Garden, which was at 50th and 8th, and play the game, and then hop back on the subway and head up to Columbia Medical School and do his homework. Wow. But, it was interesting because the Knicks had the 12th pick in the draft. I think Dallas had the 11th. And, Dallas, I thought I took a trip there to the city, and I really liked it. I thought it was a great city. But the coach and the general manager both told me, well, we got a lot of good players, and we don't think you're going to play much. But you maybe have a good future to you, but we think everybody's overpaid. So we're going to set a new standard. Whoa. And I said, okay, all right. And I said, well, all right, well, don't draft me. I think I prefer, just as a personal family thing to go play for the Knicks if I could possibly get there, or, walk in my dad's shoes a little bit. And they said, no, we're gonna, you're not gonna tell us and what to do. And I said, oh, whatever. And so I had a scholarship to go study in England, academic scholarship. And I said, well, all right, you draft me. That's where I'm going. Take the year off and go study. Be a good thing. And they didn't believe me. And so when the draft came, and it wasn't quite like it is today, but when it came, it was like, okay, thank you. I was appreciative. I said, I think I'm going to go to England and study, but thank you for the drafting me. So I got a call in December from them. I think it was December, late November, early December, and they said, well, first they sent me a telegram, actually. Wow. And they said, it was really a funny story. So they sent me a telegram and they laid out this contract. It was all unguaranteed. And for, that part doesn't matter. But they sent me a telegram and said, you're not going to play basketball unless you come in here and sign before 12 o'clock on Friday, something like that. I still have the telegram someplace. And so I sat there and talked to them, and they were making sort of, at the time, jokes about my dad. And that I said, you can talk about me. I don't have any problem with that. Not him. No, you can't do it. And so we didn't have the best relationship at the beginning. But, I called them up and I said, look, I'd like to play if it works. So they said, well, you can come here to Dallas, fly to Dallas by yourself, no agent, and come and we'll talk to you about it. Wow. And I said, okay. I thought I could handle myself. I didn't really understand the business very well. So I fly over to Dallas, and they had me in a hotel room for about 4 hours, something like that. Anyway, trying to get me to sign this contract. No negotiations. And I told you guys I'm not going. I'm going to go study. And so we parted ways, and I found my way back to Los Angeles. And no real hard feelings necessarily. I wasn't happy about it. I think 2 days later, they traded me to Denver. And so I flew to Denver. They traded me that night. I flew to Denver the next morning. We signed my contract that afternoon. That night, we played Dallas. Oh. And so I get in the game, and first play of the game, I just put my head down and drove to the basket. And luckily, I didn't even know where I was. I scored somehow. The next play, a guy who I was guarding him close. I was trying to be aggressive defensively, took his elbow and broke my nose. Blood everywhere. Funniest thing. And so, timeout. Okay. At that time they didn't stop the game. So, finally the coach calls timeout and walks over, and my teammates are laughing, and they think it's funny. And, of course, I don't even feel it because I'm hot. And the trainers, all right, kid, you got to come out. And, it was this very famous trainer by the name of Chopper Travellini. And Chopper, kid, you got to come out. I said, I'm not coming out. Put some cotton up there. Do whatever you have to do. I can't come out. So I ended up playing with this like giant wad of cotton in there. It was sticking out, but you know how you get and you're playing, and if you quit at that point, you can't quit. So you have to go back out and play. But it was a great experience. Ended up coaching in Dallas and had the best time. Loved Dallas. Ended up as a player loving Dallas was my favorite place to play. It ended up my favorite place. And because the fans used to come up, he says, we really admire you as a player. We just love to boo you. It's great. And I said, you know what? I love it too. It's so much fun. I ended up going there as a coach, loving it. And that was a whole nother story, but it was really a great experience. But that's how my NBA career started.
Kiki, you had such a great run. And, as a younger guy, I remember you the most in Denver and in Portland. That was kind of, maybe I was paying attention closer at that point in my life, but you had such an amazing run. And, but the way you guys played in Denver too, we were up and down, and you were running and scoring, and boy, you had some good players on that team too, by the way, in Denver. But were those two franchises for you? I know you end up playing, I guess, New York, and there was another one in there. I can't remember. You had four, I want to say.
I was a player coach for
The
the
Clippers.
Clippers for 1 year with Larry.
That's right. There you go. But that
Yeah.
Denver Portland era for you, and then how hard was it to get traded from Denver to Portland? Was that something you wanted, or was that tough? Because you established yourself as such a great player in Denver for all those years, in my view. How was that for you?
Well, thank you for saying that. Denver and Portland were my better years. I got hurt early in my career. I hurt my back, and my fourth year in the league, and I kept playing. The doctor said you can't play anymore, as I really couldn't run and jump the same way, and I couldn't react. So defense is reaction time, and I couldn't react very well, and just had a bad back, and so I played with this big brace and had to, the rest of my career, and had to be very careful. But I scored pretty well in Denver. We had fantastic teammates, from David Thompson to Alex English, Dan Issel, all just Hall of Fame type teammates. And the one thing I remember is, about that is, well, a couple things I remember. First off, we didn't have any plays. We had a great coach by the name of Doug Moe, who was a North Carolina product and Larry Brown's best friend, but he's complete opposite of Coach Brown, and that Coach Brown is very regimented and has plays, and very typical great coach. Doug was a great coach, but no plays. We had absolutely none. We had actually two things we ran, our two out of bounds plays. One was either give it to Alex English or give it to me and let everybody clear out. You can. But other than that, we didn't have anything. But we were a run and gun era, sort of early, played the way a lot of teams play today. Just a passing game, and we were difficult to prepare for. And anyway, got traded to Portland, and that was difficult. I loved Denver, I really did, and came back as a general manager there. But I just loved the city and the people. I had a lot of good friends, but the team, was struggling a little bit financially at the time, and it was also needed to reboot, and so they got a lot of players for me, and I understand. I understand now why they did it. Didn't like it at the time, but went to Portland, played for Jack Ramsey, who's just another fundamentally sound, great coach, and I knew I was in a little bit of trouble because the first day in practice, I'm over there shooting, I'm working on my shot, and he said, not shooting it right. Now, I'm coming off a year where I averaged 29 a game and one of the better shooters, I'm not saying I was the best shooter at all. I'm saying, I was one of the better shooters in the NBA. He says, your right foot is pointed wrong. You can't shoot like that. And I said, Coach, correct me on my defense and other stuff, but my shot, I've been shooting this way a long time. It's kind of working for me. All right, but he was very meticulous. I just say that because he was so meticulous on everything, and afterward, my back was hurt at that time. I just hurt my back, so I wasn't quite as athletic. But I used to swim after the practice. So, and I was an age group swimmer. I was a much better swimmer than I ever was a basketball player. Wow. I was a very good swimmer. Wow. And so I'm in there swimming laps, and he stops me, and he gets in the pool, and he says, you're swimming incorrectly. And I said, what do you mean I'm swimming incorrectly? Now, at that time, I held most of the age group records in swimming. And so I said, well, what am I doing? He says, well, let me show you. Watch me do it. And he watched me. And he was like saying, Coach, okay, now you were fixing my shot, which, probably needs a little fixing. My swimming doesn't need fixing. Trust me, it just doesn't. But anyways, I had a great, ended up with a lot of great friends in Portland, and we had great teams, and probably my best friend in basketball was Clyde Drexler. So, and he was just what a spectacular athlete and basketball player, he was, and certainly probably could be today. But and then got traded. I really couldn't play anymore about my fourth year in Portland. I just was missing too many games and couldn't really run or jump very well. Got traded to New York, played there 4 years, but wasn't quite the same person. But I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun playing in New York. A lot of great memories, and very very difficult to duplicate Madison Square Garden. That just when that place is rocking, it is rocking. The energy is amazing.
It is.
So it is. Very fortunate career to play as long as I did. I played 13 years. So had a really, really, nobody enjoyed playing basketball as much as I did. I love being in the gym. I love lots of stories about that. Love practicing. All those things were great.
I look back, Kiki, and I think of, again, that was kind of my era when I was playing in college and then right after college, all that kind of stuff. But, I look like, when I discovered you were you made the All-Star team twice, the NBA All-Star game, I was a little bit shocked. For whatever reason, I was thinking it was way more, because in my mind, you were one of the best players in the NBA for a long period of time. And I know you had a lot of injuries, and maybe I'm sure that affected you, but I thought you were, and I'm not trying to slight you, because I thought you were one of the best players, period, in the league. And but I'm sure injuries and things like that probably played into that number of games being played. But your career, Kiki, was one of it was special. It was one of the best. And in my view, as a young fan that loved basketball, I loved the NBA. I loved watching. I was watching it all the time. And whenever I had a chance to watch you play, I was dialed in. I was dialed into this guy, and I loved how you played too. And just with the fundamentals like talked about. But I certainly thought you were more deserving than just two. And I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I thought you.
I don't know. There are, and you know this. There are so many great players, and there's always players get left off that you say, boy, that player should have made it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure, because I didn't play enough games in my view. I wasn't an everyday player.
Yeah.
And at that time, you didn't take time off, and you just kept playing, and injuries and whatnot. And so I would probably have been a little bit better off if I took a little time off and just got better. But I just kept playing, and so never really played a lot of games as I did when I was in Denver.
Yeah.
Even Portland, maybe 1 year I played and enough games to make an all-star team. But there's so many good players. And at that time, I was a small forward. And if you think back, the NBA, and people don't realize this many times, the NBA has eras and of different types of players that kind of you have a lot of really good ones. There's today it's point guards. So, point guards and point guard skills, are just so amazingly important because of the way the game plays. It's a lot of pick and roll. It's a lot of, movement and, up and down, very fast paced. So you got a lot of great point guard skilled players, if you think about it. And in my era, you had so many small forwards from, Larry Bird was a small forward at that point, Bernard King, Adrian Dantley, Alex English, Tom Chambers, Eddie Johnson, kind of James Worthy, Jamal Wilkes. You could go on and on every night you had a star at the small forward. And it made it a lot of fun to play, and the nights were really competitive and fun. But geez, give me a little bit of a break here. Yeah.
Some players, some pretty good ones.
Yeah, some really good players. Yes, there's great players.
This is interesting. I want your take on this, because I was telling somebody this story the other day. I was a high school senior in 1982. And in 1982, the NBA Finals, I want to say it was the Lakers. It might have been the Celtics, but I know it was the Lakers. Anyway, in 82, The NBA Finals, I was in Mobile, Alabama, and they were not on live television. You had to wait. They had tape delay. The sportscaster came on at 10 o'clock and said, okay, if you want to watch the game, turn your head because we're going to flash the score up on the screen. But in that era when you were a young player, and obviously Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, those two guys kind of, elevated the popularity, but the whole league, I look at guys now, Kiki, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, but this is kind of my 2 cents, is they're making a lot of money. But a lot of that, television revenue and revenue sharing. But people forget, in the 70s, prior to your group came in and I think changed the whole game. But the league was not as popular. It wasn't in America. And it was popular to the true basketball fan, but just the normal fan, they really weren't watching. And then here your group came through there and in my view just changed the whole trajectory. And would you agree with a little bit of that, of how that era in that 80s into the late 80s maybe had did that, where they're now benefiting from that nowadays?
Well, it certainly became more popular at that time, and you had and I do think that it's one of the great things about it. Not to segue too much, but it's one of the great things about college athletics is rivalries. I love the great rivalry, and you had sort of the Bird Magic Johnson rivalry that carried over from Michigan and Indiana State. It was like it carried over. You had the two greatest players came in together. They were arch rivals, ended up great friends, but arch rivals, and two of the great historic franchises, the Lakers and the Boston Celtics, and they went at it, and it just elevated, I think, truly everything. Now, there were a lot of great players happened to come along at that time, but there's always great players. The game shifted a little bit. It became a bit faster. The three-point shot was introduced, wasn't used much. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask you a question, and I don't know if you're going to know this or not. The highest scoring game in the NBA, Detroit-Denver, I think in 1983, and three-point shot was in the game. How many three-pointers were made?
I'm going to guess it. I'm going to guess it. I'm going to guess it wasn't very many. Tell me the number.
I think there were 2 made and maybe 4 taken, something like that, or 1 made and 2 taken. It was very, and the 3-point shot wasn't part of the game. It was sort of a Hail Mary at the end, kind of, you time running out at the end of a quarter. Anyway, I really do think that, every era has its great stars. Every era is a little different. And I think the game is really set up for social media. It's set up for highlights. And, you look at the different things that came in to our game from, you go back to SportsCenter, which is, sort of established itself, and it's made for a SportsCenter show. Basketball is just made for that. And it's made for the highlight clips that you see on social media. And there's you've got great personalities in the game, and you've got coaches that are getting better and better and new and different strategies that you hadn't seen before, and maybe a take on what happened years ago, but they build on that, and you see things that you never seen. You look at the game today, and I see things, and I don't watch quite as much college or pro basketball as I did, when I had to watch every game. But I see enough of it, and I see something new every day. Every game I watch, I see something where I can't believe that guy just did that, or that lady just did that, And it's the WNBA too. It's women's college athletics that I will watch as well, and I say, wow, that person is really good. I hadn't seen that before, and I'll have to roll it back and say, all right, now how did they do that? And that's what keeps it exciting, and that's what keeps it. There's changes that happen all the time in the game, and as a great coach and player that the game is always evolving, and you need to evolve as a player, Because if you stop, the world doesn't stop. If you stop evolving as a coach, the world doesn't stop. It passes you by. It doesn't care that you stopped. So
That's
you
right.
got to keep evolving and get more and more competitive.
Yeah. Kiki, and if you go back through your career, you had such a great career. So you were a great player. You obviously coached in the NBA. You were a general manager in the NBA. You worked in the NBA office in New York, obviously, and so it's clear that there's a lot of respect for you the whole time. And so now we're at this place here recently where there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of chatter that the NBA, that the fans watching it's down and people aren't as excited about the game as they once were. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but we have great athletes. They're great players, and the skill level is off the charts to me. I look at some of these guys and what they do. It's like, wow, they're so talented.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, there's this narrative out there that, that the viewership is down and the game's a little bit in trouble. Would you agree with that, or what's your take on that? Because you're a guy that's sat in a lot of different seats now with the NBA.
Sure. I'm going to say we could talk a lot on this, and you could do a whole show on this and talk for days on it. But really, the media, how people take in games, how games are distributed is very different today. How you watch games, how players watch them. More games are watched on a cell phone than any other medium.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not watched on necessarily as much as it used to be on broadcast TV. Now the ratings went up, and for a while, cable TV and the traditional providers really benefited from the popularity of the game. But I think the game is better than ever. I mean, it's again, I really believe, and you look at the WNBA, you look at the NBA. Every night when I watch, you see something that's just absolutely amazing. And, you see players do things that you didn't think were like, I never even thought of that. And that goes for the women too. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you've got so much competition out there. And the first thing you said, I think, was absolutely right. You've got such great sports that, you've got now lots of different sports that people watch on television, or they'll watch on their cell phone, or they're cutting the cord and they'll whatever they're doing, however they consume it. And but you look at the popularity of sports not only in the US but internationally is, I think, second to none. I mean, basketball is, I think, second just to soccer, called it football in the rest of the world, soccer over here. But cricket is hugely popular. Boxing is still hugely popular. All these things, so there's so much access out there that it's tough to compete. But I think the NBA and WNBA, I think basketball is doing great as a game, even with some of the criticism on the 3-point shot. And I spent a long time on the 3-point shot. It was one of sort of my specialties, and we talked about, okay, is it going to change the game? Yes, it is going to change the game. Mm-hmm. And players are going to adapt, and offenses will have to adapt. And, the game is going to may see a little less dunking, people taking it to the rim, and they stop and take a 3-pointer on a fast break instead of go in for a dunk. Just because it's a more efficient shot. The game gets more and more efficient. Three things really changed our game, if you think about it. One was Jerry Colangelo for the Phoenix Suns. He was a coach originally, and then governor of the Phoenix Suns. David Stern had him form a committee to make the game better, change the rules, make it less physical. And so they did that. That was a big change. The rule changes in the late 90s, early 2000s took a game that was getting very rough and a little bit stagnant to a more high-flying, athletic, up and down, where speed and quickness was unparalleled. And then you look at, okay, what else is there? Well, there's analytics, and analytics started to come into our game. I think Pat Riley may have been one of the first guys that used a lot of it. But, that really told you what was efficient and what was efficient as a coach, what was efficient defensively, what was the best thing a team did. So it's sort of, and it fed upon each other. The 3-point shots ends up more efficient than going in and throwing it into the post or the pivot man. It used to be a pivot man called a pivot man because the offense, he was the pivot guy where the ball went into the post and everybody ran around him. And so, so the analytics changed the game and told you, where you should be placing players, who should play together, how what shots were more efficient, what time of the clock, the 24-second clock or 30-second clock was the best time to shoot. All these things you had at your disposal, and coaches utilize that. Players utilize that. And really the third thing that changed our game, maybe most dramatically, was international players coming into our game. And international players, it's 25, the NBA itself is 25% international players. But you look at the past couple MVPs, they're all international players. And it makes sense if you look at the numbers because the U.S. has about 5% of the world population or so. 5%. So you have this 95% of players, this huge pool of players, and basketball has become so popular internationally that, you get a guy like Giannis or Jokic or Embiid or, all these players that and now Wemby comes in and hey, you don't see players like that. We haven't seen players like that, and suddenly we have them all in our game now. And you still have great U.S. players, obviously, Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, LeBron, all these guys are spectacular. But international players are making their mark, and they're changing the game. They're changing it from big guys, who used to play down low again in the pivot. They're playing outside with point guard skills and 3-point shot skills. You got to be able to shoot a 3-point shot now. So it's a very, very different game, but it's evolved, constantly, and will continue to evolve, I think, in a good way.
Yep. Kiki, you have so much knowledge in the roles that you've served, in the NBA and the office of the NBA and different roles. And so, I think when you talk, people need to listen because of all the stops along the way and the way that you've analyzed the game. And so it just comes with so much respect. So hats off to you. But before we close, and I could talk to you for 10 hours, we could turn this show into a day-long show. But here comes the last question. Now, I had Robert Ory. I've had Thurl Bailey on. Let's see, I've had a bunch of other guys that played. But I'm going to ask you the same question I asked them. And here's the question. If you had a team and you had to win the game tonight, so if you lose, Kiki, you're never, ever allowed to touch a basketball for the rest of your life. So this is it. You have to win this one game. There's only one game. And you had to choose between, I'm not even going to say between anybody. If you had to choose the player that you had to have on your team, you only get one pick. And that's going to help you win the game. Now, remember, if you lose, you're done forever. You get one guy. Who is that one guy?
Mark, I don't know how anybody else answered it. There is no answer. There is no right answer to that question, period, end of sentence. But I am going to tell you a story. And you know me, everything reminds me of a story.
Okay.
So I asked George Gervin, Iceman, who was just he was a fantastic player, great scorer, sort of probably Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant was around. And, he's famous for a finger roll. He's famous, lots of really cool stuff. Ends up, he's a good friend of mine, and I'm sitting at dinner with him. And I said, I don't know, I called him Ice. I said, Ice, who's the toughest guy you ever played against? Who guarded you the best? And, he puts down his fork and he says, Kiki, I only played against two types of players, hard 30 and easy 30. And I'm going, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, hard 30 or easy 30. Either way, I was getting 30.
That's a
But
great
you got so
answer.
many
That's a
players. I
great
mean, by the way, how do you pick between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, Larry Bird? Come on, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Steph Curry. You know, you got some players, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor. It's like, okay, going back in time, you got Oscar Robertson. You all through the eras that they were, spectacular. And I think the one thing that everybody should realize: stars were stars for a reason. They'd be stars
Mm-hmm.
today. You know,
Yeah.
they have a mentality, they have a drive, they have I'm gonna find a way. Um, and a lot of competitive people, and obviously, I mentioned, maybe 5 or 6 players. I didn't even get to Kobe Bryant, who, arguably has
That's
got
right.
to be somewhere in the top 5. It's like, so you're going to leave a lot of players off, and I just don't have a good answer because I've been beat by all those players. So they were all spectacular one night.
Well, I'll let you know that both Thurl and I know Robert, both of them said number 23 for the Bulls. They didn't hesitate, but that was maybe
Yeah.
in their era. But he was a pretty
That,
good player.
you know what?
But
There, that is not a wrong pick. As a matter of fact, you could go with that all day, every day, and defend it every single minute of your life for sure. He was something special. I don't know if you'll
yeah,
ever see
but
him again, but something.
no. Kiki, the guy that I don't think gets enough credit is Kareem. Was Lou Alcindor. I don't know that he gets the credit as far as maybe the one of the best ever, because he certainly was one of the best
Oh,
ever. Period. But he
yeah,
could be in that
absolutely.
discussion easily.
You look at great centers, from Wilt, who at one point held just about every record there was to hold in our game, to
Mm-hmm.
Bill Russell, to the great Bill Walton, who unfortunately we just lost. But his one year in Portland, he was as good as anybody,
Whew.
as anybody. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you, I will ask you a question now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you probably
Oh.
you actually may know the answer to this question. I got to be careful. So I think it was in the early '60s. You had Oscar Robertson averaged a triple double, never been done before, and now we've had it done.
Mm-hmm.
Westbrook did it again, but Oscar Robertson, it was an unheard of thing. He was in his
Mm-hmm.
prime. You had Wilt, 100-point games, averaging 50 this particular year. 50 points, and they didn't even keep block shots. He probably had 10 block shots. I think it was something like 25 rebounds. It's like, what is that? I mean, it's incredible. You have those two guys. Who was the MVP of that particular year?
I have no idea, but I want to know.
It was Bill Russell.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
who, yeah, he averaged rebounds and not many points, but you know what? His team won.
His team's won.
Yeah, yeah. The guy averaging 50 points, a guy with a triple double. Bill Russell was
Yep.
MVP. So, I
Wow.
always remember that. Being and
Yep.
this as a coach and a player, you've been around this game a long time. Being part of something greater than you are is the best feeling in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you can be great on your own and wonderful and all these accolades, but being part of something bigger than you and contributing to it and playing a role and playing a part of it, there's something special about that, and team sports does teach that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'll wax a little poetic now. We could use a bit more of that in our world today. It'd be
Mm-hmm.
nice. Be nice if we passed that
Mm-hmm.
thought process along to the next generation.
Yes. Yep. Well, Kiki, it's been fabulous, man. I have had so much fun, and again, we could talk forever. But you have been a credit to the game, to life, to UCLA, to the NBA. So, anyway, congratulations on just a phenomenal, phenomenal run, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, Coach, I appreciate it. I've been an admirer of yours for a long time. Great coach, great player, great human being. And I'll end with this. As as much fun as I had, and I might have taught people a few things along the way, I learned more every day than I could possibly have taught anybody. So I'm totally grateful for my time every single day in this great league, and the opportunities I've had to give back have been great. But I'm the one got the benefit. I got to play and
Wow.
learn something new every day. It's great.
Well said, Kiki. Thank you so much.